I've got a murder here committed by a dead man in a house he couldn't have got out of, involving a girl found horribly strangled with her hoe and tocking removed in the down-tear cloakroom.
Oh, have you ever heard of silence?
Welcome to episode 10 of the Jonathan Creek podcast. Oh, Ian, did you enjoy the week episode?
Yeah.
It's like silence would have been better there.
I think silence is overrated.
You think so?
Especially on a podcast.
Yeah, that's the point.
I mean, it has its place.
I think some of our listeners would suggest it's not overrated. It should be employed a little bit more.
Well, you say that, but there's people who have technology on their podcast players that let you skip all the silences so you don't have to listen to them.
I've got that myself. Don't use it.
No, I don't. That would ruin everything.
Yeah, dramatic pauses suddenly disappear.
It's like watching the end of the X Factor and they say, and the winner is, and then just see who the winner is.
Huh?
Instead of making you wait for a whole advert break and
That would
3 more minutes.
That would be good, actually. Anyhow, never mind that. Part 2.
Part 2, did you enjoy this as much as part 1?
I think so. It's more of there's more Jonathan Creek. There's more mystery this week, or more solving of mysteries, I think.
Yeah. I think when we talked last time out about the way the story had been expanded a bit to fill a 2-part episode, I think you kind of get an impression in part 1 that that's been done, but there's less padding, so to speak, in this week's episode.
They get down to business.
No, they don't.
Or hint of it. Shall we?
Why not?
Because I don't like you in that way.
What they all say.
Okay. Have a summary?
As always.
Rack on.
In part 2 of The Problem at Gallows Gate, the mystery, which had begun to unfold, takes a further twist when a dead man's fingerprints are found all over the cottage where Felicity was murdered. With the police progressing their own investigation, will Jonathan and Maddie find the zombie killer in time? Or is this whole thing a little too unlikely to be true?
Thanks, Ian. Back to these unpleasant individuals. At least there's not as much Fast Hands Freddy this week.
Not as much. A little bit, and he gets his comeuppance, which we can talk about.
Yeah. Although I am not sure if the comeuppance is sufficient.
Well, we can talk to that in due course.
We can. This episode starts with a recap flashback session. I don't think we need to do that. If you want a recap, go and listen to last week's podcast.
Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting the points that they picked out, though, from the previous episode and what they didn't focus on. So it was all really about the relationship between Fliss and Duncan, between Fliss and Neville, and then a lot about Kitty and Hughie, which was an interesting choice of things to pick up. But I suppose those are the things they wanted to then follow up on in this episode.
Sure. We're still at the police interview room. Claire is bringing Inspector Barrison up to speed on who is who and what happened before the break for the night, and they'll leave, except for...
Yeah. Actually, before we get into that, have you ever seen this before where a police officer interviews a whole bunch of unrelated people
in the same room
at the same time about an incident, giving them a chance to line up their stories, especially when he has reason to believe that he can't eliminate all of them?
I think there's been liberties taken here. You're correct. I don't think that would ever happen.
But anyway, as they go to leave, Jonathan and Maddie are prevented from taking their exit.
Yes, they have to give their statements in separate rooms, as you would expect everyone to have done.
Yeah.
Barrison clearly doesn't like Maddie, and we find out why when he produces her book.
Yeah, I mean, she's made a career out of police ineptitude, or at least her perception of police ineptitude and miscarriages of justice.
Yes. You can understand why the police might not be the biggest fans of Maddie in this situation.
I mean, in a way it makes you think of Making a Murderer, where the police were so embarrassed about the fellow being proven innocent, having gone through a whole process where he was convicted, that they then maybe weren't kindly inclined towards him thereafter. So it's the same sort of idea. Something's happened, the book's been written, they don't like her, and she's going to hear about it.
In the next room, we see that Jonathan has been illegally handcuffed and is rightly furious.
He asks if he's Joseph K, who I investigated and found it was the protagonist of Kafka's novel The Trial, but I didn't know that myself.
Okay. He demands to use the toilet and is escorted away by a burly PC who doesn't remove the cuffs.
Well, once again, this is a suggestion that the writers of this show think that sexual assault is hilarious.
In this case, I think we can look over that. I don't think there's any suggestion that this cop is going to sexually assault him.
He's just going to handle his...
Yeah, but it's not in a sexual manner. It's not in a sexual assault.
I would be quite concerned, and Jonathan himself refers to this as being a form of rape.
Yeah, but, you know, touching off the penis doesn't necessarily...
I don't think this is police procedure.
No, it's certainly an abuse of his human rights.
Certainly is. Back in the other room, Barrison is enjoying himself.
Why?
Well, he recaps the accounts that they've heard of the evening just to get things straight, and points out that when the police arrived, the doors were locked from the inside and the windows, and the only people in the building with the body were Maddie and Jonathan. And when Maddie responds sarcastically, he writes down her words verbatim, causing her to wrinkle her nose, shall we say. She's not chuffed about this.
Whilst we're here, let's quickly discuss two characters.
Okay.
We've got Inspector Barrison. He was played by Stanley Townsend, born in 1961 in Dublin, I think. Known for The Tunnel, Gallivant, 24, Live Another Day, Cars 2, Sherlock, Rough Diamond, Casualty, Ballykiss Angel, and The Bill.
It's a decent CV.
It is. Jennifer Piercy played Kitty, the only likeable character. She has been in Doctors, Holby City, Coronation Street, Absolutely Fabulous, Lovejoy, The Two of Us, and Grange Hill. No standout roles, I don't think, for her.
Despite this menacing approach that the police are taking, it appears that they do release both Jonathan and Maddie, because we next find them at the Windmill.
Correct. Maddie is asleep, having spent the night, and Jonathan has to use an unconventional method to wake her up.
Yes, well, he tries a number of different things. First of all, he shakes her violently with no response whatsoever before he resorts to spraying his deodorant on her feet, which makes her furious but awake, which was the goal.
We find out that he slept on the sofa, just in case we weren't sure. As she makes breakfast, what does she discuss?
Well, she ponders the two possibilities that exist in this case. Firstly, that Kitty was wrong. She didn't see Duncan. She's misidentified him. And secondly, that Duncan's not really dead and he was there in the house.
We also find out about the perils of salt before they go on to look at the evidence in some greater detail.
All right. Evidence. Which I've made a list now. But no doubt you can remember it all, Mr. Photographic Memory. That pipe under the wash basin. Duncan Proctor was a pipe smoker. I suppose you'll say it could have been put there deliberately.
It was put there deliberately.
Because?
If it had fallen from someone's pocket, some of that loose ash would have spilled out when it hit the floor.
Hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense, does it? Why are you going to frame a man who everyone knows is dead?
The big question is, why did he take off her stockings after he'd killed her and throw them in that bin?
How'd you work that out?
You said 3 of them had just been washed. The other 2, fairly obviously, she'd been wearing.
Where'd you get obviously?
Because her shoes were lying next to her on the floor. A pair of tight-fitting boots. There's no way they fell off. They were deliberately removed there in the bathroom. And would you wear a pair of boots like that on your bare feet?
All right, but the word why springs to mind.
It's got an echo of something I just can't access. What the hell does that remind you of? We'll pop it when it's ready. So what are your plans for today?
My plans? Our plans? What do you think? Going back to Gallows Gate?
So as we heard there, they're off to Gallows Gate, where they're trying to find out how women could be murdered by a ghost.
Yeah, they're not really trying to find out how women can be murdered by a ghost, though, are they? That's just for dramatic effect.
Correct.
Claire is in the house at Gallows
Cottage.
Gate. We'll call it a cottage, because that's what it is. And she's not happy to speak with him. Her hairdryer's broken. She's a bit frazzled. But that gives Maddie an opening.
Yes, well, she barges in. I mean, there's been journalists there all morning, apparently. And we've seen this before. She's quite good or bad, depending on your viewpoint, at just invading people's privacy and homes.
Yeah, she's got a bit of a brass neck.
Yeah, she claims Jonathan will fix the hairdryer. And inside, Claire tells her that she moved up from London to Gallows Gate thinking that there'd be less crime. And then she references Maddie's own recent break-in.
I didn't spot that at all. It's not in my notes, but obviously we learn later. Maddie doesn't really click about that right now.
No. Claire goes on to tell them that Felicity was a cartoonist and that she herself is an osteopath and was working late the previous evening.
Which she now regrets, obviously, because clearly she could have stopped a murderer.
I would not be... It's like saying, oh, there was that plane crash. I regret I didn't make it.
Makes no sense.
Someone's came round to your cottage and murdered your friend.
I'd be glad I worked late.
Yep, that'd be a lucky one. I'd be saying, oh, thank F I wasn't here.
While they're there, Maddie hunts through the drawings that Felicity had left and finds a picture of someone being decapitated.
With a samurai sword or a samurai person.
Something going on. And then they're interrupted because another of the answering machine tapes has gone missing.
Yeah, and I think we are meant to assume that the decapitation represents Kiko.
Yeah, I think we can assume it's Kiko, but Maddie obviously hasn't met Kiko, so she would have no idea what that was representing.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Claire then shouts out in annoyance over the missing answer machine tape. Not the one from last night, but a second one that she had just put in that morning.
That's quite creepy, isn't it?
Yeah, you'd start to get a bit edgy, I think.
Just the idea of someone being in the house. Yeah.
Jonathan walks in at this point with the repaired hairdryer. Describe it.
Yeah, it's fine, he's fixed it, but the cable is now less than a foot long.
And we cut to Maddie and Claire on the floor, drying her hair right beside the socket.
Yes, and Claire talks about the party that they went to at Duncan's place in Northumberland.
Yes, provides more background on Duncan for Maddie, including his army past and Felicity.
Yeah, she's not aware of any family that he had, but she thinks he was obsessed with Felicity.
Duncan didn't love her, she doesn't think, but there was that obsession there.
Yeah, so that maybe explains one of the things that we were pondering last week. We didn't know what was going on when they went to the bedrooms. Maybe they were just never a couple. He was just, got this obsession going on.
Yeah, maybe the type of thing that he doesn't particularly want her or doesn't want to commit to her, but can't stand anyone else being with her.
Yeah, so the rejection wasn't so much, I'm leaving you for him, as, like, I've told you I'm not interested.
Claire also tells them that Felicity had fallen for Neville, but that, ironically, he had dumped her for another woman, and Maddie suggests an Oriental woman.
Can't say that.
You can't, not now.
A little bit racist.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what Maddie's doing here is thinking back to the drawing.
Sure.
Because that's maybe the image. That's because otherwise, why would you say that? How would you know? Claire explains that this demolished Felicity. She obviously was a bit emotionally unstable.
Yeah, and at this point we see Jonathan musing over the shower curtain rail and cistern. He's looking up at these items.
Yeah, he's pondering what he's seeing from that perspective.
We don't know what he's thinking, however.
No, and Claire asks him for his theories at this stage, and he and Maddie are of the opinion at this point that Duncan is dead, but Claire explains something that they don't know.
Yes, she has a big reveal of her own. What's that?
The police have been in touch,
Okay.
and boots that Felicity only bought 3 days ago that were in the house are covered in Duncan's fingerprints.
Dramatic.
Ooh.
How do you explain that? Go on. Explain it, Ian. Well, no, don't.
No, we'll leave it for later.
We're next at a restaurant where Neville is proposing to Kiko, but just as they start to enjoy the romantic moment, Maddie interrupts and sits herself down to ask some questions about Felicity. We've seen her do this sort of thing before as well.
This is a particularly egregious one. It reminds me of the sort of thing that Columbo would do back when we did the Columbo podcast.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Where he fakes embarrassment and he apologises, but within moments he sat himself down,
Looking at the menu,
first refuses anything, but then decides to have some chilli, some wine, whatever, some crackers.
lobster or something, yeah.
Yeah. No, you're spot on there. It's very Columbo-esque.
I liked the continuity work on Kiko's hair. She now has short hair. Following Felicity's scissors attack.
Neville is rightly affronted by Maddie's gumption and asks who she is. Now, what does she tell him?
She says that she is processing Felicity's life insurance claim for the family, so she's the investigator on the case, and she has some questions.
What are these questions?
Well, she wants to know when he last saw her, and he explains about the contretemps that they had when Felicity came to his house, and Maddie explains about the eyewitness, about Kitty having seen Duncan.
But Neville doesn't buy this, doesn't care, says someone's wrong, something's wrong, because he was there and he saw, he was in the room when Duncan jumped.
He's adamant, he angrily protests his position here. And Maddie introduces the idea of the fingerprints and then orders some food, as we discussed.
Pours a large drink.
Yeah, and she starts asking some really peculiarly personal questions.
What were they?
Well, she asks if when they were having sex, Felicity ever talked in her sleep or shouted somebody else's name at the critical moment. And I suspect this is because she's sympathetic to Felicity, both because she's dead and because Claire's told this story about what Neville did to her, so she's just trying to stir the pot with Kiko.
Back at the Windmill, Maddie is having problems with Jonathan's typewriter, as we heard at the top of the podcast.
We did. The listeners won't get this, but every week when either one of us refers to the opening clip, we point at the ceiling. It makes no sense. But yes, at the top of the show, you heard her. There's no S on this typewriter, and this doesn't really bother Jonathan, who just wants to concentrate.
Yeah, but before that, he has to explain how common the letter S is. I think Maddie says it's the most common letter out there, and of course he has to go through the hierarchy.
Yeah, and not only that, but it explains why it's useful information to know that it's the 8th most common letter.
Oh yeah, if you're into cracking ciphers, it's very useful.
Yeah.
He asked for silence from her so he can concentrate on this abstract feeling or idea that he has.
She makes an offer to him to help with his thought process, but he's not impressed.
Oh, what's the offer?
To put on the stockings that haven't inspired him while they're in his hands.
Yes. I'm not sure how serious she's... If he'd said to her, yeah, on you go then, it might have led somewhere.
Yeah, but he doesn't get the suggestion. He just thinks in terms of his process, and it doesn't even occur to him that she might have a second meaning there.
Now, Maddie next answers the phone to Claire. So this is, again, someone answering someone else's phone.
This is all very 1990s. I remember there's all sorts of things like this, answering other people's phones, walking through people's front doors without waiting for them to answer it when you ring the bell.
Sitting down at their table in a restaurant.
These things that just don't happen anymore.
So it's Claire on the phone. A third tape has been stolen. And this, I think, gets the marbles running in Jonathan's mind.
Yeah, he has the impression that maybe someone's trying to find a message. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would one person keep trying all the different tapes for a message if it wasn't on the first one? But anyway, Maddie suggests they have to go up there. Jonathan absent-mindedly agrees, and then is frustrated to realise she meant Northumberland.
Yes, and we next see them in the car, along with Claire, who has joined them. And Claire mentions the unenviable task that the police have at the cottage, and John asks about what this task is.
Yeah, Maddie has phoned the DI to say that she may have accidentally flushed one of these answering machine tapes into the cesspit on the night of the murder. I think that wouldn't happen in a show nowadays. This show ascribes a sense of humour to the police. They would need to have a sense of humour to not be furious about this.
But they were furious.
No, but to not treat this as a crime, a waste of police time. And they would need to have a sense of humour to handle Maddie in the way that they handled her earlier on. I don't think that a 2010s police drama, you would interact with the police in this way anymore. I think the world's slightly different now.
Yeah. You see, this is because I think the show straddles... It's a drama with a flavour, touch of comedy, sometimes black humour. Now, I think that you would get away with it if it was a straight comedy today.
Yeah.
And a drama, no, you wouldn't. But I think there's enough humour in here that it does sort of lend itself to it. I mean, I just don't think you would make this type of show these days.
It's possibly true. We do get a quick clip of the police wading into the cesspit before we come back to Jonathan and Maddie bickering about I suspect possibly the trope of women being terrible at navigation.
Well, I'm not sure if it's women, but it's
Maddie in
Maddie.
particular.
Yes, she's just known to be terrible. He predicted this, and it turned out to be the case.
I mean, it is known that men have a natural sense of direction that women lack.
I'm overhearing.
Oh, sorry. That joke would have worked better on television.
Yeah.
They finally arrive at Duncan's house, I think about 2.5 to 3 hours later than expected, which was originally going to be 5 hours. So it's been a half a day at least.
Yeah. Maddie is moaning about the fact that one man lives in this huge mansion of a place and asks about Ben and Buster. At the same time, we see Jonathan pacing out steps around the area where Duncan landed, and then he lies down on the grass.
He does. Claire, on their way over, points out to Maddie the grave that had been open, which is now filled in, and Maddie makes this sort of macabre suggestion that they grab a shovel. Duncan's name certainly hasn't been added to the gravestone, and Maddie also asks Claire about the army pals who were at the party.
Yes, she tells them that they're probably back serving overseas now. Now, Jonathan then notes that there is still some blood around the slabbing and claims that there's something wrong with that. Didn't you ever watch Quincy?
I didn't.
I did, but Jack Klugman, fantastic.
Did that show you what was wrong with the blood?
Nah.
I found it odd that there was still blood there, however long it's been since he's fallen.
Yeah.
The police haven't come, it's not been sampled, maybe it's been sampled, but it's not been cleaned up, it's not been any rain, because blood wouldn't last through much rain.
Sure. I mean, it's not the police's job to clean up.
No.
And he lives there himself, so there's no one else who would have employed someone to clean it up, but I take your point about the rain.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Inside the room where Duncan jumped from, they see the broken caricature lying on the floor, and Jonathan seems to have a problem with his back.
Yes. Maddie suggests that Claire gives Jonathan a seeing to in the bed while she goes to make some calls.
Correct. Claire was played by Jessica Lloyd. Recently has been in Wallander, also Silent Witness, Poirot, and Head Over Heels, but not an overly long CV.
One for the police dramas or the crime.
Loves it.
Yeah. Jonathan's not persuaded by this suggestion, but Maddie does insist that he endure some osteopathy.
And as we see her downstairs on the phone, what do we hear coming from upstairs?
Oh, I've written down wails of anguish.
Agonising screams.
He's clearly not able to endure even the gentlest of attention from Claire.
So Maddie returns with an insult and some information.
Yeah, Jonathan's sitting up gingerly. Maddie taunts him, saying she thought she heard a baby in here. 3 out of the 4 local funeral directors she's discovered had not heard of Duncan, and the 4th's away somewhere. None of the hospitals heard of him or answered a call out on the night.
Very, very suspicious.
Yeah, that's also something that's proliferation of mobile phones, because about 8 folk would have phoned 999 if you tried this.
Of course.
Claire does say that an ambulance did come on the night,
but Jonathan believes it's all been a hoax and is about to tell him how he would have done it when he hears something downstairs.
Yes, somebody's entered the building.
Yes, there's an atmosphere now. I think they're all a bit scared. They know something has been going on.
Yes, and Maddie sends Jonathan to check because he's the man. So she's been both racist and sexist in this episode.
After going down to investigate, he ends up hiding in the cupboard with Maddie and Claire as the person approaches the door.
We get a wee point of view shot as is traditional.
Customary.
And yes, he opens it, but he initially only sees Jonathan and he has a question for him.
Well, who is it?
It's the detective inspector.
Barrison.
Yeah.
We're down in the lounge now, and outside we see the police dig up the grave, whilst a confident Barrison insists that they will not find Duncan in it.
Yeah, he thinks there's as much chance of Duncan being in there as there was of a tape being in the cesspit. He also thinks, and again, this is the kind of thing that is pure comedy and not really dramatic at all, but the police will not be buying Maddie's next book because they've waded through enough crap already.
But they are the nice sort of lines that make this show what it is, I think.
Yeah, and I think it shows from a character point of view that he is not, angry about any of this. He understands what's going on. It's tongue-in-cheek.
You think? I think he is angry.
I'm sure he actually is angry. It just doesn't actually fit at all. They would make a joke like this.
He then very methodically asks Jonathan to explain how Duncan did what he did.
3 people saw him jump. Everyone saw him on the ground, but nobody saw him land. In between, there was a gap of maybe 7 or 8 seconds, which is when they did the clever bit.
They?
Well, there's no way he could have done it on his own. He needed at least 2 accomplices, one up top and one below.
Buster? And Ben.
Whatever their names were. His 2 chums from the Lancers. Look, it stands up. Duncan's got this total mind-numbing crush on Felicity. He knows she's screwing Neville. He decides to teach them both a lesson. It's the sort of sick joke you can imagine 3 drunken soldiers dreaming up between them. They just go for it, like a military exercise. Leaping off a 2nd-floor balcony is no big deal, if there's something to catch you at the bottom. You've dug yourself a big hole, with a tightly sprung net inside, rigged up a camouflage frame covered in turf, which slides across in seconds so you can't see the joint. As per the plan, one of them rushes in as he's about to jump. So if the other 2 get to the balcony too quickly, he can hold them back for a minute, tell them not to look or whatever. During which time, Duncan's out of the net and into position. The hole's disappeared, and so's his friend, making sure he's first on the scene to pronounce him dead.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about this. It's the sort of explanation that we'd heard in earlier episodes where Jonathan is deliberately trying to wind Maddie up. So it's a ridiculous explanation, and Maddie says, "What, really?" And he says, "No, don't be stupid, that's crazy." And that sounds like that type of
Definitely does.
solution.
It didn't occur to me at the time, but thinking about it, the friend rushing into the room for no reason before he jumps.
Yeah.
Why did that not throw up lots of red flags at the time?
Another problem I've got is that in the first episode we saw that he was in the bedroom before he went up to confront.
Yes, he was sitting in the bedroom below it, getting more and more angry.
More and more drunk. He was sitting with half a bottle of whiskey. Now that's fine if it's a joke where he walks in and pretends to be drunk.
Yeah.
We're seeing him on his own. He's not acting for anyone, and he's sitting with a half empty. So he's drunk. If you're about to perform a leap from 2 floors up into a hole in the middle of the night, you don't get drunk.
Well, maybe he's just one of those extremely arrogant folk who thinks they can handle it.
Could be, but it doesn't sit right. I mean, I think it's because when we're watching it as an audience, at that point, we're meant to think he's upset, but it doesn't make sense when you know what you know.
It was just Dutch courage.
Yeah, that's, again, not... He looked really drunk, and he'd like half a bottle of whiskey. That's not like a quick nip. Look, that's...
Yeah.
You don't want that much Dutch courage when you're jumping into quite a small...
Yeah. I didn't really get the whole thing with the grass over the top of the net that was moved aside. How was it? Was it on a board? Was it on a mechanism?
Who knows?
How did they sort that? Did they just remove it and replace it with, normal turf? When was that done? Why was nobody watching the property?
Yeah, I think it's quite a silly setup, because it's not a crime scene. You'd expect top forensic detectives to be investigating the death scene. Lots of people walking about taking pictures. Cutting a chunk of grass out may very well be noticed.
Absolutely would.
Anyway, Jonathan continues his explanation. He says that the ambulance men were also in on it, and that you can tell that the fake blood was dropped from just a few feet rather than seeping from a wound.
Yeah, and Maddie rightly observes that you don't start to bleed before you hit the ground. This thing about the ambulance folk doesn't sit right though. Real ambulance people, highly trained professionals, would not just be paid off and be willing to do this.
No, but I think he said it could have been some army friends.
It could have been some, it's very vague, some local. It's a big, huge hole in his theory.
Yeah. Any other sort of conspiracy, the more people that are involved, the more people whose lips are loose and down the line.
Yes, and also, if he was dead, why would he go in an ambulance? Surely it would be some kind of police and then the mortuary in a black bag, I guess.
I think he's assuming obviously the police aren't involved, so that the shocked friends and guests would not question that. He needs to get out the scene. So I think he has to take that risk. But the whole thing's a little bit silly. That doesn't ruin the episode, but when you consider this, it's nonsense.
Yeah. At this point, Claire has an idea.
What's that?
She thinks Duncan, if he's alive, could be hiding at a house in Maida Vale. It's not been mentioned before or since, and it's not mentioned how she knows about it, but apparently there's a house in Maida Vale that the army folk use.
Yeah, well, she'd previously said that Buster and other idiot.
Then, yeah.
So I think she probably assumes that it's one of their houses. If they're overseas, then...
Yeah, maybe. Maida Vale obviously being where the BBC's got quite a famous recording studio.
Is it?
Yeah, which I guess is why they chose it for the BBC show.
So we go to that house. The police with sledgehammers break down a door, and a startled Duncan leaps to his feet before being cuffed and arrested.
He says, "What have I done?"
Yes.
You faked your death.
I suppose that lends itself to your point about perhaps he was just an arrogant type. It's like, why are you arresting me? I'm not utterly...
He genuinely seems bemused that they would be here looking for him.
Yeah. This is just our rugger friends in the army and all that type. This is sort of hijinks we get up to.
Good blokey fun between blokes.
Yes. Go away, you plebs.
Don't you know how wealthy I am?
They also find a tape in his bin.
Just one.
So down to the police station, Kitty is brought in to try and ID Duncan.
She's been criminally underused in this episode so far, but she's back.
She is. She appears to manage this successfully.
Well, we assume so. She leaves the room in tears, and Adam approaches the detective inspector.
Yeah. Adam is meant to be not the most likeable of people, but I think, again, I've said this last week, I like Kitty, and all this sort of hatred, especially coming from Adam, makes me a little bit...
This is really quite cruel. First of all, to be upset by this, and second of all, to mention it to a third party who doesn't know her. It's just mean.
What does he mention?
Well, he asks if the police can release her from the investigation so that she can go back to Scotland because she's struggling. She's obviously witnessed what she believes is a murder, and she can't sleep, and she keeps coming through to Adam's room and kind of getting to his bed. It's a bit weird, but if folk are suffering from stress of some kind, it's not unheard of, I don't imagine. And he's got all these lines, 3 a.m, like something from a nightmare world as the duvet's lifted up and you feel it sliding in beside you, or to wake in the night to those eyes staring at you on the pillow. It's his sister.
Yeah.
He should have some form of affection, you would think.
He
doesn't seem to have any sort of human emotion towards her.
Where are we next?
Comet.
Yeah.
You know where to come.
For those who might not be aware, Comet is an electrical appliance store where you can buy...
Does it still exist and not go bust?
I'm not sure if it went bust or if it was bought over by Curry's or Dixon's. Are they still around? Curry's is still around.
Certainly online. I think, yes, you get... you get one of them anyway.
What's the one in Jamaica Street?
Dixon's.
Dixon's, okay.
Yeah, they were all one company at one point, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, Maddie's impressed that this brand new computer has got a Pentium processor and a CD-ROM and an S.
Yes. But they're not there to buy, merely borrow.
Yeah, she's going to use the computer to start writing her case notes up.
Yeah.
She calls it the case of the inanimate animator.
Yes. Jonathan naively wonders why Duncan hasn't confessed as yet. Yeah, I think that's... Well, why would you?
There can only be one reason, because he didn't do it. Yes. Or maybe because he's an arse.
Yeah, or maybe because, like most guilty people, you don't confess. You say, no, it wasn't me, and you hope you get away with it. It's your right to not confess.
Certainly Jonathan's concerned about some of the evidence as well, though. He's worried there's only been one tape found, and it makes him ponder whether somebody else wanted that message.
Yeah, he suggests the third tape may have been taken by someone else before they are unceremoniously thrown from the store.
Yes, Maddie and her floppy disk in hand. She wonders why Jonathan keeps obsessing about the stockings thing.
Yeah, she thinks he might have an unhealthy obsession.
But he suddenly realises that it reminds him of bootlaces.
And he says, yes, and he says something along the lines of, he didn't take her stockings off, he took her stockings off her.
Yeah, I think Maddie says that, and that makes Jonathan realise what the thing was, yeah.
Okay.
He wants to go back through the whole thing, and everything that everybody said, big waving flag to the viewer, yes, you've heard somebody say something critical here. They're going to find the real killer.
Over at Neville's house, Maddie, Jonathan and Claire arrive to a very, again, rightly annoyed Neville and Kiko. It's 12:15 in the morning.
Did you see Kiko's method for answering the door when she's just out the shower.
What was that?
She puts on a raincoat, I think, to answer the door. It's Claire's with them as well, along with Maddie and Jonathan. And Maddie apologises for once again interrupting their love life.
Yeah. She's not sorry.
No, she doesn't care.
They want to know about these 3 tapes. One was found with Duncan, but what about the others? And all eyes turn to Neville, who eventually admits why and what he did.
Yes, he took it. He reached the elastic limit, and when Kiko came back with her hair chopped off, he left a horrible message full of warnings and threats, and the next day he went and took the tape in the hope he could recover the message because he felt bad about it, I guess.
No, not bad about it. It's not a good... It's not...
He didn't want it found around the scene. But surely...
No, it's because it looks bad for him.
Yeah.
He's threatened someone who's ended up dead.
Yeah, but
he's implicating himself.
It's not a great thought process, is it? Oh, the police they'll have left that there then, that message.
Yeah.
Anyway, all he recovered was a blank tape.
Yes. However, he is not the only one that has something to admit.
But there was a third person in the house who witnessed the whole weird and wonderful event. And I think now might be the time to put your hand up, don't you? Claire? And tell us exactly how you murdered her. We've had quite an interesting afternoon, actually, with the police pathologist. Turns out those deep lesions in the victim's neck contained some skin cells that didn't belong to Felicity or to Duncan, but funnily enough, matched up exactly to some still in Jonathan's shoulders, after your fingers had been digging into them yesterday afternoon. You'll testify to the power of her grip, I think. Rosas will be waiting for you at home. Wouldn't bother going anywhere.
Duncan was seen by a witness that night, violently strangling Felicity at the kitchen window, and yet he did nothing of the kind. What Kitty saw, she didn't really see at all, did she?
Felicity was so obvious. She didn't even have to try. But men like it obvious, don't they? Men like Duncan.
So, through flashback, Claire then goes on to explain her motive in crime.
She was essentially jealous. She idolised Duncan, and then she grieved for him, and then when she saw him with Felicity, she moved on to despising the two of them.
And when she arrived home that night from her work,
she saw Duncan through the window, same as Kitty did.
Yes, she saw that he was still alive, and this obviously shocked her. So Felicity was pushed over the edge during this when she heard the call from Neville on the answering machine as she was arguing with Duncan.
Yeah, she's obviously, as we mentioned before, emotionally vulnerable, and she got to a point, having heard that message, she just wanted to kill herself and started to take pills, which is what Kitty saw Duncan stopping her do.
Yes, he wasn't trying to strangle her, he was trying to save her life.
Yes, and having dropped his pipe in the process, he found that she'd passed out, moved her through to the bath alive, and then took the stockings and things away so that she wouldn't hang herself in the bathroom.
And at this point, Claire entered and strangled her out of spite.
And planted the pipe, presumably under the sink, and then left.
Back in the present day at Neville's house, Claire seems very cold and quite pleased with herself and admits that it was her who took the tape so that no one would suspect Neville instead of Duncan.
Yeah, so Felicity wasn't the only one she was trying to harm, obviously Duncan just as much.
Correct.
Jonathan explains why Duncan would have tried to take one of the tapes as well.
Why was that?
To corroborate his story. And for Claire, they feel that Kitty was probably a bonus, someone who saw Duncan there. That's an unexpected...
Yeah, she couldn't have predicted that, but twist, she used it to her advantage. Now, Maddie stupidly admits that the skin cells from the massage were a lot of crap.
Yeah, because she thinks this is done and dusted now. So,
but you can't, she's admitted it to no one other than that little group.
Yeah.
So...
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Now Claire just says, oh yeah, I was only joking.
Yeah, I was just giving them a ghost story or something. The downside to Kitty's observation obviously was that Maddie and Jonathan came over and Claire was still in the house, it turns out, when they arrived. hid, and then when they smashed the window, left through the back door. Now, this completely undermines the whole locked room thing.
Okay, before we get to that, unless you were going to chat about this.
I'll get to it, but yeah, on you go.
Okay, while she was hiding, that was the point where she overheard Maddie talk about her own break-in.
Yeah, and that's obviously triggered for Maddie when Jonathan asked her to go over everything that everybody said to her, which she obviously remembered.
Yeah, so the point of that is that she never mentioned any other point about the break-in.
That's the only time Claire could have heard, which means Claire must have been there.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things they observed when they broke in is all these doors have been locked from the inside. But in this reconstruction, Claire leaves through the door and locks it from the outside.
Yeah.
So why could the killer not have done that?
Exactly.
It's not a locked room mystery at all. They just say, oh, this is a locked room mystery. No, actually, no. It's fine. It was locked from the outside. It's not a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it can be a locked room mystery when there can possibly be multiple sets of keys and...
Yeah. Why did they even mention that in the first place then?
Yeah.
Red herring, I guess, but they were wrong. That's basically the end of it. Claire just looks a bit smug and we don't see her again.
We don't. Where do we go next?
We go to Adam's performance, I think, presumably live on television.
That was a TV studio we're at, yeah.
Kitty's in the audience. We see her there, I think, with Maddie.
Mm-hmm.
They all enjoy the show, but Huey's next up.
Yes, he's going to put on a performance.
As he enters, Maddie leans over to Kitty to explain his secret and urges her not to tell a soul because it's, need to know only. As Kitty ponders what she's heard, she has a bit of a flashback and kind of draws her coat in.
Realises that she has been violated.
Yes, there's been an offence committed against her. And Huey goes to play his trumpet and is immediately knocked out, or at least knocked down, by a swinging, is it a boom mic?
Boom mic, yeah. Now, this is what I had mentioned earlier. So basically what the show is saying is it's okay to laugh at a sex offender as long as he gets a comeuppance, which is effectively getting a sort of smack on the head. That's it.
He was exposed as a pervert on live television.
No, he wasn't. A mad old woman stumbled across. I mean, I don't think the PR folk are going to...
She's not mic'd up, so all the TV folk would hear someone yelling.
Yeah, just looks like, there's some,
interrupted the show.
Old crone has had a go up, and she's probably a racist.
Who knows? Adam looks suitably dismayed, and we roll the end credits. I think that's framed in a way to make it look like we should be sympathetic to Adam, but why would we be?
No, we shouldn't be.
Yeah, so if you feel sympathetic for Adam, you're watching this wrong.
You are. There are episodes where you can laugh with him, you can laugh at him, and you can perhaps even feel a little bit sorry for the guy. But generally, he's that type of guy you'd want your daughter to marry.
Sure. He's far too old for your daughter anyway.
Far too old, yes.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't put it past him in 15 years.
That's plenty.
The way that the character's written.
All right, okay. While we're talking about Huey Harper, Fast Hands, Loose Hands Harper, he was played by Clark Peters, who was born in 1952. An American who moved to London in the 70s, made that his base, but I think he's worked a lot in the States because he's probably the most famous actor in the episode. He has starred in The Wire, Notting Hill, John Wick, Marley and Me, The Tunnel, Jericho, Jessica Jones, True Detective, Person of Interest, Treme, Doctor Who Dreamland, Damages, Life in Mars, and Mona Lisa.
I read that how he got the role for this episode, and this is in your trivia.
There you go.
He showed up for the audition process and pretended to be blind throughout the entire process, and he generally impressed the casting folks, and that's how he got the role.
Sure. Olivia nominated, Tony nominated, and he was also a backing vocalist during the 70s. A varied, long, distinguished career.
Almost certainly not a sex offender in real life.
Probably not. One thing that I noticed, now I've not read about this, so it could be total nonsense, but at the very end, during Adam's stage show, there was a big muscular chap. Now to me, he looked like one of the gladiators from the 90s. I think it might have been Shadow, but he's not credited. So if anyone knows, was that Shadow on stage? I think he was wearing the Egyptian type costume,
okay,
with a loincloth. But I recognised him. I think it might have been a gladiator.
He was my favourite gladiator until he got kicked out for drugs. Yeah.
Again, kicked out for drugs. They were all on.
These other guys that naturally built their bodies this way.
Yeah, the only other bit of trivia I had was the Joseph K.
Yes, I've stolen your thunder on that. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about the book, though.
1925 novel.
Presumably well known, just not by me.
Well, I think I've not read it myself, but yeah I think it's one of these ones I think everyone has heard of, or it's it's an important book, but not
maybe one of these references that meant to make you feel a bit clever if you get it.
Yeah, sure.
Without looking it up.
Episode review.
Okay.
Motive.
Jealousy, rage.
Clues. I'll run through them. Stockings, the pipe, the answer machine tapes, the blood splatter, the lack of local knowledge of coroners and funeral parlours, etc. And Maddie's burglary itself.
Oh, Claire knowing about it, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that was part of the gotcha.
Yeah, and probably Duncan's fingerprints showing up all over the place.
Fingerprints, yes, on the boots, etc. The gotcha itself, yeah. Admission, really. It's the
Well, they figured it out based on the burglary and then putting the pieces together.
Yeah, we can discuss next week, is it? Or yeah, we can discuss next time. I think is next time the last episode of the.
Yes, we've got the season finale next time,
where we can discuss whether or not we think any of these gotchas will actually stand up in court.
Yeah, I enjoy doing that.
And next time we have Mother Redcap.
Sounds familiar. Is that a popular episode, would you say?
I think it is, yes.
Excellent.
I certainly enjoy it.
Well, we'll look forward to that, and we've got 2 weeks to wait, so in the meantime, if folk want to spend their time productively, they can go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show and subscribe, or chat to social media, or over at jonathancreekpodcast.com.
You can. Should mention that the episode was first broadcast on the 21st of February 1998, 50 minutes in length. Forgot that this week.
Okay, that's in keeping with the rest of the season, I guess.
Okay, anything you want to add?
No, that's all for now, so I guess we'll see folk next time.
Cheerio.
Bye.